how did we come across the Mellon Foundation and what enticed us to want to apply for a grant?
This goes back to my first month on the job. So July of 2014, there was a Chronicle of Higher Ed article about the then new president of the Mellon Foundation, Earl Lewis, who is well known for his work around race and justice. And I read the article and I thought, wow, he should know about the College of St. Benedict because we can do some really amazing things. And I thought it was completely appropriate for me to insist that he know about St. Ben's. And many people kind of laughed. They were like, you're going to approach the Mellon Foundation. Mellon is an extremely generous foundation whose work is really focused on the humanities, diversity, education. But we aren't the type of institution that tends to seek out and find resources from the Mellon Foundation. So I'm sure some people thought it's probably not worth the cost of this stamp. I sent a hard copy letter. But Earl Lewis was a visionary leader of the Mellon Foundation and really extended the number and types of institutions the foundation works with. And he accepted my letter and agreed to a meeting, and we built a relationship over several years. So the first Mellon grant, which focused on the humanities, and first year experiences for students in terms of how students are advised and engaged by faculty in the first year, really moved the dial for us at St. Ben's and St. John's. And because we had such great results from that, we were able to go back to request the second round of funding. And it's important for us to be in that conversation. So Earl Lewis has now moved on from that presidency, but we are now invited to participate in colloquia that the Mellon Foundation has, which places us in a new room. Even more, and I think the highest praise I can give to St. Ben's and St. John's, and particularly Jean and Kyle and the faculty who participated in the first Mellon grant, is our program officer, Jean Tobin, has suggested to other schools that they reach out to us and look at how we did our proposal, and has suggested that we really used not only a great process, but had a great outcome for building proposals. So it was really quite incredible.
I was part of those first grants as a participant, the first time that we had the Mellon grants, and there were two grants, one for College of St. Benedict and one for St. John's, and I was part of the humanities cohort that went through that. That work felt familiar to other work that we've been able to do in that it was introspective work. It was really geared toward faculty and our pedagogy. So I was very glad to participate in that work. It feels different from what we're able to do now with this additional support, so I thought I would say a little about getting from there to here. The quote you read a little while ago from our proposal, part of that came out of work that Kyle and Jean on the first Mellon grants had invited us to do. If we were part of those cohorts, part of what we could do was participate in a journal issue of our faculty journal and collaborate to write pieces on inclusion. So I was working with two colleagues, Terry and Dana, and we were working on our piece. And I was sitting in this local cafe one day, and my job was to sort of do some of the theoretical work around inclusion, and I was thinking, right, it's about, as you were saying before, becoming new all the time, perpetually. And I'm sitting there in this cafe, and I'm thinking, that's hard work for an institution. I mean, that's hard work for an individual, but for an institution to become perpetually new, by virtue of being institutionalized, the weight is against that. The weight is with the history of a place and being what it is structured to be. It's institutionalized.
That's not what we do.
That's not, right, exactly. And to physically and financially be an institution, some of that staying power is in the fiber of the thing. I mean, we don't, in fact, knock down our residence halls or start over again every day. So I just point out really like the practical gravity of a thing. So how is it that an institution can commit itself to perpetual change? That is hard work. So I'm sitting there in this cafe. This is during the first Mellon grants, and I'm thinking, well, I believe these things, I'm going to write these things down, but how would you actually do that work? You know, so I was allowing myself to be theoretical in a cafe. I didn't seem like I was writing a realizable goal. Then, Mary, you went and got a larger proposal in order for Mellon Grant. And so while I'm busy about the work of a faculty member, next thing I know, our president has for us institutional backing to try to realize these very difficult aims. That was a turning point for me and my career. I thought, oh, change can be possible. Institutions can get on board with it. Then, because of this grant, some of my actual hours of work time are rededicated to this. So then I started working with Brandon and Amanda, and now more recently Cindy, our team, our Mellon team, for Becoming Community. And I realized this kind of work where you're trying to take an institution and invite it to perpetual transformation takes hours of people time. It takes us being redesignated to focus on the structures of a place and to find where we can put flexibility into structures. And we can't do it just as people looking. We can't go into someone else's office and say, put flexibility here. No, we have to work with that team so that they own for themselves what this would look like. This has taught me, all in the brief time that we've had Becoming Community so far, that change like this takes time, resources, money, people's emotional investment. I never thought when I became a faculty member that part of my time could ever be dedicated to this kind of work. We have the Mellon Foundation to thank for that. We have you to thank for believing it could happen. And now I know. I think at this point in my career, I've learned for change to happen, we need resources, and we need a community that shares those resources for us. I don't think on our own internally we could have found either the emotional or the financial resources to make this kind of designated determination to transform structures happen. So this grant can make that get started and probably just begin. 3 years in, there's still going to be work to do. And surely Mellon would have known that, but this kind of institutional deep look is made possible by this grant. I'm delighted, and it's a rare thing. Yeah, I think a lot of dreams happen sitting in a cafe. It's very rare that those dreams are actually given the possibility of action. So
that's the work we do each day with young people, is we give possibility to their dreams. And the way you described how we'll use the grant is beautiful. And I would add, I think there are two other things this grant allows us to engage in that's so critical to the work of transformative inclusion. So in addition to just the necessity of resources to buy time, to have people, to put programming into place, the grant enables us to engage in intentional reflection, which is really, really important. To do the work of transformative inclusion is difficult, emotionally draining work, and you have to have time to process what was the experience that we just had. And we don't have a lot of reflective time in our professional or sadly even our personal lives. We're all very stretched. I hope that this Mellon grant enables us to have intentional reflection and time, and that really makes a big difference, I think, in the quality of the work. So you weren't just sitting in a cafe. You were thinking about, what does this mean for an individual student, but for an institution? Mm-hmm. And without that time for intentional reflection, we don't do that. And the second big thing the grant enables us is collaboration across areas, something else we don't tend towards in higher education. This grant says, not only do I want you to intentionally reflect, I want you to do it with people from across the campuses, from across areas, from across perspectives, and that's really invaluable. And the reality of it is that takes resources, and that's what the grant enables us to do.
Right. People will be coming together as students, staff, faculty, local community members. That is really exceptional. And that gets me excited about the possibility of institutional change, because I think the places where our institution is most deeply cemented down into a cultural pattern would be in the areas that we don't often have to share with each other. The way the faculty does things, the way this particular staff office does things, the way this student organization does things. If we sort of keep it to ourselves, these cultural patterns are well protected. Once we start coming into each other's space and talking, then I think we can challenge each other in new ways. Also, that reflective time, I think, will be relational time. Time to get to know one another. And one of the ways that we're trying to build that in most carefully would be through some long-term groups that really stick together in the midpoint of this grant. There's so many ways people can engage with this grant. This is only one of them. But those reflective groups will give people the chance to step back, have that sense of reflection that you were speaking of, but also build some relationships. And when I think about the times in my life that I have been able to step furthest from my sense of a comfortable center, it's been because I got into a connection with other people, and out of commitment to them, interest in them, desire for their well-being, I stepped away from my sense of perceived norm and center. It wasn't because I thought it was a great idea. It was because I cared about someone, I'd come to know someone, and I moved, I shifted. So I don't think we could persuade people to take on perpetual becoming because they listen to you and I talk or read a lot of theoretical material. I think it would be because they meet someone and they think, oh, I'm invested for this person or this group.
They're transformed.
Yes, right.
They're transformed, which takes us back
By each other.
to the original.
Yes.